What if I told you that one of the best looking games of the year almost didn't look this good on PC? And the reason it does, the reason your frames aren't tanking, the reason your GPU isn't crying, is because the developers actually did something most studios refuse to do anymore. They optimized. Properly. So today we are diving deep into StellarBlade, not just the gameplay, not just the story, but how this game performs, why DLSS is either saving your experience or masking developer laziness, and whether this is actually worth your time and your hard-earned money. Before we get into it, here is what I am working with. On the CPU side, AMD Ryzen 7 7800X3D, 32 gigabytes of RAM running at 6000 MHz, and an RTX 4070 Ti Super with 16 gigabytes of GDDR6X memory. Now, the 7800X3D deserves a special mention here. This chip is an absolute beast for gaming. Thanks to AMD's 3D cache technology, it has a massive 96 megabytes of L3 cache, which translates directly into higher frame rates and smoother gameplay. And here's the thing, it is now one of the best value gaming CPUs you can buy. The price has dropped significantly since launch, and nothing at this price point comes close for pure gaming performance. As for the GPU, the RTX 4070 Ti Super is actually discontinued. Nvidia stopped making it to make way for the 50 series. But here is why I am bringing it up. If you can find one used right now, you are looking at around $660 or less, and it still performs comparably to the newer cards. The RTX 5070 Ti, AMD's RX 9070 XT, both rivals in this tier, all pushing past that $1,000 mark easily. And here is the kicker, the real-world performance difference between those cards and the 4070 Ti Super, 10 to 15% at best. That is it. You are paying over $1,000 for a 10 to 15% improvement. So if you are smart about it and hunt down a used 4070 Ti Super, you are getting flagship level performance for a fraction of the price. Now, my 4070 Ti Super supports DLSS super resolution and 2 times frame generation, meaning AI generates 1 extra frame for every real frame rendered, effectively doubling my frame rate. The RTX 50 series pushes this even further with multi-frame generation at 4 times, 3 AI frames for every real one. Now, the 5070 Ti can hit some impressive frame numbers with 4 times multi-frame generation, but there is a catch. That level of frame generation introduces noticeable input latency. Your frames look great on screen, but your controls feel less responsive. At 2 times on my 4070 Ti Super, that trade-off is much more manageable. I will take smooth and responsive over big numbers any day. I am not on a 50 series, and I will be upfront about that, but even at 2 times, the results in StellarBlade speak for themselves. Here's a question that should bother every PC gamer right now. Why are games getting worse at optimization, even as our hardware gets better? We have got DLSS, FSR, frame generation, tools that can basically double your frame rates. And instead of using that as a foundation to build better games, some developers are using it as a crutch, a way to ship an unoptimized mess and just say, put DLSS on and you will be fine. But StellarBlade, it is a different story, and that is what makes it worth talking about. Straight out of the gate, StellarBlade hits you. The art direction is aggressive, detailed environments, fluid character animation, and a combat system that rewards you for actually learning it. It is a third-person action game that feels like someone crossed Bayonetta with a Korean anime aesthetic, and somehow it works. The world feels alive, the enemy design is genuinely creative, and the music. Do not get me started on the music. But I'm not here to just hype it up. Let's talk numbers. So here's where it gets interesting. Running StellarBlade on my rig at 2K with DLSS super resolution set to quality mode, I'm pulling your frame numbers. Smooth, consistent, barely any dips even in the most chaotic combat sequences. But here's the thing I want you to pay attention to. I turned DLSS off to see what the native performance looks like, and it still held up surprisingly well. That tells you something important about how this game was built. The developers didn't rely on DLSS to fix their problems. They used it to enhance an already solid foundation. Compare that to Dragon's Dogma 2 or Stalker 2, both notorious for tanking frame rates the moment you turn DLSS off. Dragon's Dogma 2 was still stuttering in cities months after launch, and Stalker 2 at 4K without DLSS had even high-end cards scraping below 50 frames per second. Night and day. Let's talk about DLSS, super resolution, and frame generation properly, because a lot of people still don't fully understand what they're doing. Super resolution takes a lower resolution image and uses AI to reconstruct it at a higher quality, so you're rendering at say 1080p, but getting something that looks close to 4K. Frame generation goes further. It actually generates frames between your real frames using AI, which is why you can go from 60 frames per second to what feels like 120 frames per second. On my RTX 4070 Ti Super, I'm running 2 times frame generation, meaning for every real frame, the AI generates 1 additional frame. That alone is a massive boost. But here's something worth knowing. The RTX 50 series takes this even further, with multi-frame generation up to 4 times, meaning it can generate 3 AI frames for every 1 real frame. I don't have a 50 series card, so I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But even at 2 times, the experience in StellarBlade is buttery smooth. And that gap between the 40 and 50 series, that's a conversation for another video. Now, in the wrong hands, this becomes an excuse. Developers see these numbers, decide they don't need to optimize their engine, and ship the game. Your experience suffers if you don't have an NVIDIA card. It's lazy, it's becoming an industry problem. But StellarBlade earns it. The base game is well optimized. DLSS here is a bonus, not a life support system. That's how it should work. And that distinction matters if you care about the long-term health of PC gaming. And here's the kicker. StellarBlade wasn't even built on Unreal Engine 5. It runs on Unreal Engine 4. No Nanite, no Lumen, none of the next-gen engine features that developers use to justify poor performance. And yet, it visually outperforms most Unreal Engine 5 games out there. How? Because Shift Up actually sat down and optimized every single frame. Custom shaders, handcrafted lighting, a refined animation system, all built on what some people would call an outdated engine. That's not luck, that's craft, and it makes the lazy Unreal Engine 5 ports even harder to excuse. Okay, let's actually talk about what it's like to play this thing. Combat is fast, punishing if you're sloppy, and deeply satisfying once it clicks. There's a parry system that rewards precision. Mess it up and you're eating a combo. Get it right and you feel like an absolute legend. Exploration gives you a decent amount of freedom. The world isn't fully open, but there's enough to discover that it doesn't feel linear. Story-wise, I'll keep it spoiler-free, but it's got more depth than you'd expect from the marketing. The characters are actually interesting. My one gripe, protagonist, which in my opinion is one of the best written in a game so far. It's not a deal breaker, but it's worth knowing going in. So after everything, the performance, the optimization, the gameplay, does StellarBlade deserve a spot on your hard drive? I've got a clear answer, but before I give it to you, if you've been finding this useful, hit subscribe. I'm building out more of these deep dives, and next up, I'm looking at Pragmata. You don't want to miss that one. Here's where I land on StellarBlade. For PC gamers with an NVIDIA card, especially if you've got DLSS support, this is a genuinely great experience. It's one of the few games where I felt like the developers respected my hardware. They didn't just offload their optimization problems onto AI upscaling. They built something solid and then made it better with DLSS on top. If you're tired of buying games that need a top-tier GPU just to run at 60 frames per second, and even then only because DLSS is doing all the heavy lifting, StellarBlade is a reminder that it doesn't have to be that way. Is it perfect? No, but it's one of the most complete packages I've played recently. That's it for today. If you want to see more performance deep dives like this, subscribe. It genuinely helps. Drop a comment below. Do you think developers are getting lazy with DLSS and FSR? I want to hear your take. I'll see you in the next one.